Okay, I've tried to make this video halfway decent for way too long, didn't work out, and that's why you should make yourself prepared for something a little bit different. Because what I'm going to review today is a webcam, which is something that you usually use for something live, right? And live, everything goes as planned, right? Again? No. And in case something goes haywire in this review, that's just how life rolls. And in my opinion, the only authentic way to review a webcam, which in this case would be the Logitech Brio, more of a prosumer level webcam. It supports 1080p 60, also 4K 30 frames per second, and even has Windows Hello support. But with a price of around $200, I think it's a little bit more of a niche product, and it will stay that way until it drops in price quite significantly, I would say. But I also don't know quite exactly who they are targeting with this product, because sure, it's nice for a high quality video conference, Skype call, and also for a really nice game stream suited. But if that's worth the price, we will see. And that's why I think the comparison here that I will make to the most popular webcam on the market, the Logitech C920, makes a whole lot of sense. So let's switch to the Logitech Brio. Here we can already see it, but before you will see more of it, let's actually get into the sound and check the mic. So this is the microphone of the Logitech Brio. In my opinion, works absolutely fine. Of course, any game streamer will use a proper external mic anyways, but for just a video conference call, Skype call, this should do the job. Of course, there is some echo since it's farther away from me, but the quality is absolutely decent. But I've already mentioned one feature that we didn't get on the C920, which is Windows Hello. And I have to say it works out really, really nice, because once you register your face, that sounded weird. Once then you can log in every time you just briefly glance into the camera, and this actually even works in complete darkness. And this was something that I didn't expect to work so nicely with the infrared camera. So that's a nice convenient way to log into Windows, and you don't need passwords anymore. So sweet. What else? Something that we didn't get on the Logitech C920 is different kind of viewing angles, because here you have 65 degrees, which is definitely way more narrow, definitely way closer. You also get 90 degrees, as you can see, the whole room, and you also get 78 degrees, which is then obviously what you also get pretty much on the C920, and a quite nice sweet spot. But what I want to show you now is the direct comparison to the C920, and get prepared for a shock. Boom. Yes, I actually did not expect it to be that big, because when I saw the video of the Brio first, I thought it's not actually that impressive. But seeing them side by side here, you can see a huge difference. The background is way sharper. I myself am not quite as blurry. Everything else seems way more contrasty, way better. Sharpness is better, the white balance, the lighting and so on. Everything seems nice. And what you can also maybe already see, if I move a lot with my hands and go stuff closer, you can see, yeah, you have seen that the autofocus is quite jumpy on the C920, and the brightness, the exposure, as you can see, is very abrupt. Where all of this is super nice and subtle and smooth on the Brio. So I definitely know to appreciate that, and that's definitely one major advantage. But in terms of software, even though we have more features on the Brio, it comes also with one quite huge disadvantage. But let's go into the software here first. On the left side, you can see the software of the Logitech Brio, and on the right on the Logitech C920. And in the corner, once again, you can see me on the left on the C920, on the right on the Brio. So let's get into a few things here when it comes to the Brio. Of course, you can set it to standard or wide, even though I didn't see any difference here. You can set it to 50 and 60 Hz, the viewing angles, as I said. But in terms of video control, it's pretty much the same. You can control it, move it around, and also zoom in, something I can't really show off just yet. And you also have a kind of green screen effect without the actual green screen. So this works in software, and you can set some different kind of backgrounds, something I also can't show. But let's get into the most important part, the picture itself, because options you get here for brightness, you can change that around, as you can see here, and you get percentages for that, something that I really like. Also intensivity for the colors, so the saturation. You also get an automatic white balance, as you can see here, and it works quite nice, same as for the autofocus, because as you can see here, we can move it all the way back and all the way. But like I said, it's such a smooth autofocus compared to the C920 that I definitely think you should use that. But here is my huge problem that I don't have on the C920. Actually, I have it in some way, but it's not as present because I have a workaround. Here's the thing. What I've noticed on my last live stream is the following. When I had this black hoodie on, you will see now that everything gets way overexposed. The C920 actually lost autofocus, which is usually not the case. But as you can see, the closer I get, the overexposed I get. And if I was actually a little bit more up top and even more black was there, that's just too much. And even though we have the nicer exposure transition and also autofocus on the Brio, what we have though on the C920 is an option that is called right light and also automatic. Because if I turn both of these off, now I can manually control, as you can see here, the lighting. But the most important part about that is that I can set it to the way I want, and then, for example, maybe slightly adjust the contrast, boost that a little bit, also the intensity. And as you can see, then the colors of the Logitech C920 look way more natural, it looks way more pleasing, and this is the way I used it for my videos back in the days. And now we have the huge advantage that I can do whatever I want and the exposure won't change. So sure, the autofocus will still be jumpy, but we don't have the exposure issues anymore. And this is a huge flaw of the Brio software. So what I definitely hope, and I really ask them to please, Logitech, give me that option to have the manual exposure here as well. Or if not, at least give me some way to control the sensitivity of how extreme the exposure works. But just making this toggle to turn it on and off to have it manually would be such a huge difference. It would just overly so much make the experience better because, like I said, the sharpness is quite nice, the contrast is great, the overall autofocus and exposure level transition works so nice. But just all that, in my opinion, gets kind of screwed because it's way too jumpy and all that. So this is quite a letdown, something that they definitely made a little bit wrong. But I also want to get to one more thing. That would be the actual design of the camera itself. So let's get them both here. And let me quickly go into the C920 here, which I have to say in terms of design is an absolute kind of masterpiece. Because we have a thin cable, it's fixed though, which is nice. It's also flexible. But what you can see here, if I want to just put it on any kind of monitor, this works very, very nice. And you always have this kind of wiggle room to position it, which makes it so much more convenient to adjust it the way you want to. It also has this and everything else, so everything is rubberized, and this just makes a whole lot of sense. But the Brio, which in my opinion is so flawed in terms of design, because first of all, it has USB Type-C, which is nice to have, but it's not a fixed cable, and in case you want to maybe drag it around and show some things, it could just get plugged out, which is definitely not as smart. Some kind of securing would have been nice, but even then, the cable is very stiff and quite thick. Once positioned and always will be stayed like that is fine. But then there's the other thing, where on the C920 I have the mount for a tripod here available at all times. I can only get that on the Brio if I take off this, which is actually a little bit of a flimsy thing, because as you can see, if you take it out and in a few times, this will get quite loose. Same as actually this quite nice but not properly thought out thing. We have this kind of shutter that you can close, and then you have your privacy intact because no one can see you anymore. But this is also way too loose and fell off all the time in my normal use. And then we have the kind of biggest issue for me, which is the adjustment, because you can also place it on your monitor quite nicely, but then adjusting it, as you can see, is quite a pain, because every time I tried to move it, it either just fell off or it wasn't just precise. So why didn't they give me this wiggle room as well, which was so much more convenient? So even though it looks maybe nicer and it has some few extra features like USB Type-C, so you could replace the cable and so on, I think this design is not quite thought through. And that's why I would say, let's get into the pros and cons to cover that and make it quickly done. First of all, what are the pros? Definitely the way better picture quality itself. It's way sharper. 4K, even though I don't think it's all that great, is at least available. You have Windows Hello, the way better contrast. We have this background option to have it like a green screen and so on. And this is all nice. The autofocus and the exposure transition is so much smoother, and that just makes a huge difference. But they should fix two things in the next model. That is the whole construction that I don't think is so great. But one thing that they can fix in this version, which would make an actual huge difference in terms of my rating, is the manual exposure. Just give me the toggle, let me manual adjust it so it's fixed on one level, because the autofocus was no issue like it was back then on the C920, but the exposure changes, especially if you have something dark on and if you are a little bit closer to the light and so on, makes it quite a little bit weird experience. So fix this. It is not a huge request. It is something that can be done. I hope it will happen, but I don't really know. Otherwise, in terms of price, it's still at around $200, but I would actually say, when I saw the price and when I saw the quality on my first live stream, I thought this would actually make sense to be used as a kind of daily replacement for my Logitech C920, because the quality is quite close, good enough for a stream, so I don't need my Logitech G7 and my Panasonic G7 anymore, because there I always have to check the cameras, the levels, the autofocus and so on. This could save me so much time, and it would be so much more convenient. And if I would do it more regularly, I would definitely shell out the money with the nice Windows Hello feature and so on. It's a win-win. But as for right now, it's still a little bit too expensive, so it should drop at least to like $130, $150 to be worthwhile, and then they should fix the software. But other than that, I could easily recommend it, because it is quite a nice piece of tech, but it's not a piece of tech that everyone actually needs, because you can get a Logitech C920, as you have seen, a little bit tweaked, can reach quite some nice levels. Of course, not nearly the ones of the Brio, but it costs way less, and this would have been it. So let me know your opinion. If you have had or still are using the C920, what you think of it. If you maybe had already used or still are using the Brio, let me know what you think of that. Or maybe if there is a workaround for the manual exposure that I've just missed, that would be actually something very handy, because I'm usually someone who misses these kind of tweaks, workarounds or fixes. So this would have been it. Have a nice day.